What is up? It is a Labor Day edition of the Splash Eye podcast. Today, I'm joined by one of my homies from college, Kyree, who first time appearance on the podcast. So I'm definitely really excited to have him on. And today, it's going to be a relatively quick conversation, but essentially, since the last time I recorded anything, unfortunately, the news came out of the passing of the late great Chadwick Boseman, and obviously, he played a lot of iconic roles, most notably Black Panther. As a huge Marvel fan, this obviously was very sad news to hear. But I just wanted to bring someone on to chat with me, maybe discuss a little bit more about his cultural significance and impact, and kind of what he means to to what kind of he means to not only the culture, but specifically the African American community. And so today, without further ado, I'm joined by Kyree. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you, Matt, for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm very happy to have you on. So I guess I'll start by asking you, aside from the obvious sadness, you're sad when you hear the news and whatnot, kind of what when you think about Chadwick, when you reflect on kind of what Chadwick Boseman was, what he embodied, etc., what are you going to think of first?
So the first thing that I think of about Chadman Boseman was just like his legacy and like what he meant like as an actor and as a person for the Black community for the most part. Um, because he became an icon, right? He became a figure that many people in the Black community and many people outside the Black community as well looked up to.
Hmm.
Um, Again, a little bit like you said before, notably for his portrayal of Black Panther. And that was like significant of itself because it was such a high grossing movie. Um, and it was for a Black audience. And it was for a Black, it was basically a love letter to African American culture and African culture.
Hmm.
And to have Black Panther, a mainstay Marvel hero who like superhero who wasn't a sidekick was
Hmm.
like just something new, and to have Chadman Boseman perfectly portray that character meant a lot. Meant a lot to young people, meant a lot to old people. It didn't matter.
Yeah. Obviously, he's not like the first big black actor to make it big, so to speak. But I think you bring up a good point, right? Marvel is like this huge franchise that is like known worldwide, has all sorts of IP and whatnot. And for him to, like you said, not just be a sidekick, but to actually hold his own and be one of the people that, one of the characters that people get really excited about, that has to mean a lot.
Yeah, and like I think what people loved about it most was that he was a king, like a literal king, right? So there's a lot of people on social media has been throwing the word, "Oh, keep your head up, king, king this, king that," to like everyone, right? To everyone, right? But like this portrayal is that he was a literal king, so it's like you just for the first time, I mean not the first time, but like on a movie this big, a
Hmm.
movie that he
Right.
portrayed in a role this big, to have an actual Black African king from a country that's wealthy, right? A country that isn't poor, that isn't, destroyed by, like everything else that you see in Africa in the news or, portrayals. To thrive, to be literally probably the best country in the world was like fascinating to see.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about this, but what I really like about Black Panther is that it brings up this kind of debate of, do we use these resources for ourselves, or do we try to use it to help other people, around the globe who are like us, right? But not necessarily Wakandan. And in some ways, you actually kind of understand where the villain is coming from, not which, Michael B. Jordan's character, not something that you quite often see in a Marvel movie. I'm curious, kind of your take on just some of the themes from the movie.
Yeah, so I personally think the themes of the movie are really good, and I know some people probably might have a hard time understanding what the actual theme of the movie were, but um, I know we're focused on Chadwick Boseman, but again, like talk about Michael B. Jordan's character, Killmonger, right?
Yeah.
And like his whole villaincy um was different. It was like different from the typical villain. People bring out Thanos for being one of the best villains, right?
Hmm.
But you look at Killmonger, and a lot of people see his ideas as radical, as like really extreme. And then why I agree to a certain extent, but like the message, that's the core message he was portraying, um, was one that was needed to be taken seriously because his whole the whole thing with Killmonger, his character, and how um, Chadwick Boseman, his character, how Black Panther played in was that you had one character that's from Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Primarily Africa. You had one character, Michael B. Jordan character, Killmonger, who grew up in African America,
Mm-hmm.
and is these themes that reflect um, Black people in America and Black people in Africa today, because there's kind of like a divide between them, right? Where you have the African American community and you have the African community, and again, that was reflected in Killmonger and Black Panther and T'Challa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have it where Killmonger, he basically wanted to have resources to take the resources of Wakanda and basically spread them out for prosperity amongst all Black people, amongst own people who
Mm-hmm.
needed help. Well, you had the opposing side was, okay, we have these resources for ourselves, and we're keeping them locked in, isolated, to help better ourselves. And some people think it was like really radical for Killmonger's and his ideals to go in and challenge the throne, take it out, and everything like that. And but the core, at the end of the day, it's like Killmonger was to a lot of people was seen as like really evil, right? He was seen
Sure,
as like
sure.
really evil, but to other people who probably can understand the message, he was very sympathetic as a character. Because if we look at it, he's like his father was the brother of the
Mm-hmm.
previous Black Panther, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had but his father was who tried to do the same thing as Killmonger. He tried to take these resources from Wakanda to
Yep.
help better the Black population in America, right? But because of that, he was killed, right?
Yep.
So understandably so, if you're Killmonger, you're gonna have some feelings against Wakanda, and you're gonna have some feelings against Black
Absolutely.
Panther, right? Because
Absolutely.
you see that your father is an idol, and he's trying to help people in America, help Black people all over, and then he dies for no reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he becomes an idol, and he takes it upon himself to you know help his father's dream to basically rise against oppression, right? So that's what he wanted to do, right? So people take him as like some all evil, murderous psychopath that wanted to destroy society, which was far from the truth. He just wanted to take these resources from Wakanda and rise against oppression,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just to arm people or to give resources people so that they can fight this oppression or they can enrich themselves so they can have wealth among themselves because he saw that Wakanda had this wealth,
Mm-hmm.
right? But this wealth wasn't being shared, right? So it's like everyone needs to have this wealth to be shared. Why can't we spread it out? And you actually see that at the end of the movie as well, right? When um Black Panther with Chadwick Boseman, he goes out and he starts these programs to help enrich
Mm-hmm.
um the world, right? Not just the Black community, but the world in general. He started to enrich this world to share these resources, to share the science, to share the technology.
Yeah. I actually, I mean, I agree with you. Like, were some of his methods probably not the best, like, dropping people left and right? Probably not. But I think you bring up a good point, right? Like, I personally, when I watched that movie, I really, like, I definitely felt like he was a sympathetic and a villain that you could understand where he came from. Like, given the like you said, given the circumstances that he was brought up in, you understood at least why he was the way he was. And like you said, um, I didn't think that he was. I personally, when I watched that movie, I never thought like, oh, he's crazy, he's radical, etc. Because, like you said, it's literally he and T'Challa, they're cousins, both born into Wakandan royalty, but one of them is born and raised in Wakanda. The other one is born and raised in America, and you kind of see that. And what I really like about Black Panther was that they made it in one of the scenes where T'Challa is in the soul world and he's speaking to his father, and he essentially says he's a monster that we created. I think that really resonated with me when he kind of acknowledges like the reason why he is the way he is because of things that we have done in our past. And I think that that scene where he has that conversation with his father and he says, you're wrong to turn your back on the rest of the world. I think that's a very powerful scene. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that was a yeah, that's like and you mentioned like that's a very powerful scene. And it's like and it's something that you don't see that much happening today, where you don't see a lot of people admit their mistakes
Hmm.
or not just admit their mistakes, but at least reflect on their actions, right? Because like they might not see their mistakes. It doesn't have to be a mistake, right? It just had to be a series of actions that lead up to something really bad happening, right? And then to have a character like that admit those actions and say, "Oh, even if they're not mistakes, even if they are mistakes, these actions led up to something horrible, and we have to take ownership of that and correct that."
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Like, not to get too big picture philosophical, but at the end of the day, none of us are perfect. So I think that's definitely a very good message. In one of the many great themes in that movie is, and this is obviously very relevant to what's been going on in America for a while, but acknowledging, recognizing the past for what it is, looking at the good, the bad, the ugly, and trying to learn from that, right?
Yeah, it's like it's very important to understand it because then at that point, like as you see at the end of the movie again, it ties back. You see that it moves forward. It moves everything
Hmm.
forward to something better, right? Once you acknowledge that, it moves everything forward to something better, in which you can share, be peaceful, and be harmony, right? So it's like it's really interesting, and that's why I think you know it's unfortunate to see Chadwick Boseman, um, like a idol, like he became an idol, like he was a normal person as well, right?
Yeah.
He's like he has his own ambitions, and it's actually unfortunate to see that he actually he passed away and that he kept his cancer silent, which I will understand. He wanted because he didn't want people to worry. He wanted
Yeah.
to keep doing what he wanted to do. And I think one of the important things that he accomplished in his life was not being Black Panther, but being graduating from Howard, right? Primarily, as an HBCU,
HBCU. Yep. Yep.
yeah, he was at College University. So it's like I feel like I mean I could be wrong, but just my interpretation. That probably was meant a lot to him as well.
Absolutely meant a lot. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen his speech, like the graduation speech that he gives, highly recommend. But yeah, I mean, one thing I can definitely say about Chadwick to kind of tie this back or bring this back to him is that, yeah, obviously it sucks that he only, he passed away at a relatively young age, but even though it was only 43 years, he did a lot, and he lived a very fulfilling life in those 43 years. And like you said, obviously he kept his battle with cancer pretty private, because I saw that apparently he, up until maybe like 1 week before he passed away, apparently he thought the whole time, like, I can beat this. And he was getting ready to apparently shoot another movie in September. And I think, yeah, I mean, like you said,
Yeah,
like,
like this yes, it's like he definitely probably was he who would think to lose, right? Especially someone like Chadwick Boseman, right? He probably embodied everything. He was the Black Panther. He was Jackie Robinson, right? So
it's
like that's
the,
another thing.
yeah,
Totally, right? That's who was Jackie Robinson. He was
James
James
Brown,
Brown. Yeah,
Thurgood
so it's like
Marshall, yeah, yeah,
yeah, like his characters are just people that just fight, and he was fighting, right? And he
yeah.
still did these movies. He still produced these movies,
Hmm.
even though he was going through all of this, right? So it's like it just goes to show just like how great of a person he was. And speaking about his movies, I'm pretty sure I think there's a movie that's supposed to be released by Netflix in
Hmm.
November, I believe, which is Mama Ron Rainey's Black Bottom.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
which I highly recommend. If you listen to this, highly recommend that when it comes out on Netflix, go watch it. It's a play by August Wilson, I believe. I never read it myself, but I have heard about it. And you know who August Wilson was? He was a playwright that wrote a lot of stuff about the African American plight in America, and the struggles that they go through. And again, like I said, like having Chadwick Boseman play such a role in such a significant movie like Mom Rainey's Black Bottom would have been really great. So the production I'm pretty sure is done, but they pushed it back to November. So
Hmm.
when it comes out, look for it, do some research. I think you'll enjoy it. It'd probably be like a really good, um I don't want to say into his legacy, but like,
Yeah.
like a nice finish or a nice touch up to his
To his
movie.
acting career. To his
Yeah.
acting career. Yeah. I don't know too much about uh, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but I did see it and I read a little bit about it, and it appears like you said it'll be his last film appearance. And yeah, I definitely I'm gonna check it out for sure. You know, show it some love, pay some respects. But I think you bring up an interesting point, right? Because if you look at his filmography, the majority of the films and the roles that he took were roles that were more than just a role, if that makes sense, right? Like, yes, there were a couple where it was like, okay, I'll give an example. Like his role in like Gods of Egypt, that was probably he probably was just like, okay, it's big movie, whatever. But for the most part, most of his roles were something that I'd say took on were more than just, oh, I'm gonna be in this movie, if that makes sense. Whether it's Jackie Robinson, Thurgood Marshall, James Brown, obviously Black Panther is huge, and then this recent Spike Lee movie, The Five Bloods, which I saw, and that was really good. A lot of them are roles where he is trying to he either plays a significant person in black history or black culture in the case of T'Challa, or he's trying to or he's essentially trying to highlight maybe certain hardships and plights, like you said, that the African American community has gone through.
Yeah, and it's just it's interesting because it's like people will always remember him for Black Panther, right?
Yeah,
And
but
like that's his large that was like
it's his
his largest
biggest role.
role.
It's his biggest
Yeah,
role.
that's his biggest role, the one that had the most recognition. And I have seen some articles say there was like his breakout role, which I disagree with. It was Black Panther was not his breakout. It was his largest role,
It
right?
was his
But it's not.
biggest role. Biggest
Yeah,
role.
but it's not his breakout role. Like him portraying Jackie Robinson. Like when I saw that movie for the first time, it was like it was historic because
Hmm.
the character and the history of Jackie Robinson was just one of overcoming racism and overcoming the odds, right? And so it was like, to me, Black Panther wasn't like, again, in the modern world, in 2016, 2020 now, is like is a very important role, overcoming the odds, and Marvel and movies, right, to have this black role. But Jackie Robinson was also it was a good movie that to actually portray, like, again, like he said, he played these characters that just was more than a role. They was
More than a
more than
role.
just
Yeah.
it was just more than he played them to inspire. It wasn't He didn't just play them to be like, here's my paycheck,
Yeah.
here's something to add to my resume, or add to my repertoire, right? It's just
Yeah.
he did it for a reason.
Absolutely. I agree. Like I said, there's very few of those roles. Like at the end of the day, if you want to be in Hollywood, you probably have to take a couple of those roles where, you're just doing it just to get paid. But if you, like I said, the majority of his filmography, it seems like he was very calculated and deliberate with which roles he took, because obviously it meant a lot to him that he was playing roles that, had real significance and real meaning and ways to inspire people. Um, so I definitely agree with you there, and it sucks, right? Be that we're not going to see that, because one thing you and I actually talked about over chat was that he was going to play Yusuke. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yasuke.
Yeah, who was one of the first, if I'm correct, he's one of the first African samurais.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
yeah, like, which is
yeah.
interesting because, like, before, like, I heard the passing, I was like I knew of Yasuke before, like, the history of Yasuke. I mean, not the history, but I knew his name before because a black as a black man myself, and as someone that's interested in Japan and Japanese
Hmm.
culture, having visited Japan myself, I was really interested. I was like, you hear about ninja and samurai all the time, right? And you see in movies, sometimes you see movies, you see like African American samurai, or sorry, African American ninja. Like, I think there was this, like, one of those movies that come on Disney or whatever, or something like that. There would be something like that, right? But to actually have an actual African samurai in Japan, that was actual real history, and he wasn't some lightweight samurai. He was actual important samurai. He was the retainer of Oda Nobunaga. If you don't know who he is, he was one of the people that one of the most historic people that helped unify Japan, um, which is other retainer Hideyoshi finalized. So it was like, to have this African samurai and to actually have Chadwick Boseman play this samurai Yasuke. would also would have been big. Not to just for black people, but to just show the history that far back in a country of Japan that was isolated for so long,
Hmm.
where you didn't really have black people travel, in the 1500s. So it would have been really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's he. I mean, I'm surprised we haven't even said this like after chatting for 20 minutes, but he really is one of the most poised and talented actors that I've seen. When you look just strictly at like acting skill alone, he really is one of the more talented actors that I've had the pleasure of seeing. And so it just, it sucks we won't see him play, like that, that role.
Yeah,
And future performances as T'Challa and as other characters, but
yeah, it
yeah,
is.
it's unfortunate.
Yeah. And then like speaking, if I may backtrack to Black Panther again, right quick, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
um, we don't like it'd be really, really, really good for his memory and his legacy if they don't replace Black Panther with someone else.
I agree. I
Right?
agree.
It's like just have his sister become the new Black Panther, which she does in the comics, right? So it's like because you see DC all the time, they always replacing Superman and Batman, right?
Yeah.
So it's like every movie there's a different character, right? And it's like obviously Black Panther is to Marvel will be a cash cow, right? It's a cash cow, right? And it's something the fans want to see Black Panther and more Marvel movies, more and more crossovers, right? But it's like to have like another actor come, you know, against someone that had their whole like just had like the apex of his career
Hmm.
and like the recognition. Not to say that would be tainted, but it would be I don't know, be kind of awkward. A lot of people, I know fans I know would not be happy about that.
I agree, especially not right now. Like you cannot have someone play T'Challa that is not, and obviously, like you cannot touch that. Just throw in another actor and pretend like you just change the actor. Like no, none of that BS. But I'm curious. I want to ask you because you probably have a stronger opinion about this. Obviously, you don't want someone to replace T'Challa, just given the circumstance. But at the end of the day, it's obviously I think it's great storytelling, and it's good. It's good to have more inclusiveness in movies. So what I'm saying is, I think it's important that Marvel still touches base in some way or another with Wakanda. Am I fair in is kind of saying that? Like, I still want to see as a Marvel fan myself, and as someone who cares about seeing more, diversity in film and whatnot. Is it fair for me to say I don't want them to touch? I don't want them to replace T'Challa, but I also want to see more stories and that have Wakanda involved. I'm curious for what you think.
Yeah, like I said before, it would have been like it would be good to have his sister become the
Yeah,
new ruler, right? Let her sit on the throne,
yeah.
right? Because and so it's like you can still have that involvement with Black Panther and with Wakanda, right?
Hmm.
Um, but you might not necessarily have that's like a flashback or other recorded material. You won't
Unused
necessarily
footage,
have
something like
yeah,
that.
you
Yeah,
necessarily won't have Chadwick Boseman and T'Challa personally appear. As they use movie magic, but then it's like so just if you want to have that level of interaction, right?
yeah.
Have his sister do it.
Yeah, I
Have his
agree.
sister pick up the
I,
throne. Let her sit on the seat.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, obviously, right now that's probably not what's on everybody's mind. So we'll see. Give it a little time, obviously. But I agree with you. That seems like a kind of right way to go about it. Right? It's not disrespectful.
Yeah,
You're still able to tell these really cool stories with these great actors, and like you said, continue to take inspiration from African American and African culture, and reflect that on in a huge blockbuster movies. But um, yeah, yeah, I think we're in agreement there. So I just I definitely can get behind what you're proposing. If Marvel, if you're listening, listen to Kyrie.
yes, listen to me. That's like I'm telling you, the fans would love that. It will not disgrace Chadwick Boseman legacy. Again, it's like unfortunately actors die, and you still have material that you want to produce. So it's like it would make sense to replace the actor. But since we have an established in his comics, right, that we these come from, right, where his sister takes up the throne, she sits in the seat,
Hmm.
right, it would just be way more logical, right? So
Yeah,
Like I'm telling you, like if you had another actor try to be Black Panther, some people walk out the theater. People would do
Yeah,
it. I
yeah. I mean,
promise you,
that'd
people
be a
would do
very
it.
tough sell. I'd say that's a very tough sell for. I'd say even just Marvel fans, because I would assume most, if not all, Marvel fans like love Chadwick Boseman playing that role. So it's just like,
You know,
you
people walk out
have.
the theater. Mhm.
I'm just throwing out a hypothetical, but if you just toss in like Jamie Foxx, I love Jamie Foxx, but I don't want to see like Jamie Foxx replace Chad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's just
but
like it would be a different take on the character, which isn't bad, right?
hmm
It's not bad, right? Because you've seen various Spider-Man, and you know, people argue which one is the best, which one is
yeah.
the worst. You know, but it's like you don't want to take the Spider-Man route or take the again. I'm not shitting on DC, but you don't want to take the DC route either, right? Where you
Yeah.
have an actor play a different character every movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I agree. I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts you want to, as we kind of wrap this conversation up? Any closing thoughts you want to spill?
Um, Not really. Just rest in power
Yeah,
to
rest in
Chadwick
power.
Boseman. Yeah, and to anyone watching, sorry, anyone listening rather, like,
Yeah,
you can watch a podcast. See, there's still the thing there, but regardless, just remember Chadwick Boseman's legacy. Remember who he was and what he meant for the African American community, the African community, what he meant for Hollywood, what he meant for Marvel, and just try to embody his ideals to forgive, push on, especially during these troubling times, right? Just take those to heart, right?
yeah,
Take
yeah.
those to heart.
I
I'll
echo
put
that
it.
100. I'll echo that 100%, and I think that's a great place to kind of stop. So I want to thank you, Kyrie, for joining me today. Really, really glad to have you on, and talk about this. So once again, really thank you, really appreciate you coming on, buddy. And
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This was interesting. I always wanted to be on your podcast.
yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And as for the listeners, I want to thank you for listening. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe on whatever medium you're listening to, whether it's Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or YouTube. Once again, appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you soon.